повинен ще бути.
Ні, ну все включено.
І є і переклад на англійську десь, да? Чи буде?
Переклад, да, йде паралельно під час трансляції.
It's February 5, Ukraine Media Center Grand Forum continues its operation. My name is Svetlana Chaparenko. Now we are about to talk about the summary of the year 2023 in the book market of Ukraine, and also we will have the presentation of the book today, a novel about Putin's doppelgangers, a book by Oleksandr Krasovytskyy, who joins us in this studio today. Good afternoon. So let's start a conversation with what's going on and what was going on in the book market of Ukraine last year. And is it true that Ukrainians started reading more? Because according to the observations, many people continue buying books or buy electronic books. So what are your observations and what can you tell us about the sales of the books within the last year? So first of all, we need to understand that to see this year's picture of the year 24, we need to see the picture of the period before the full-scale invasion, then what was going on during the years 22-23, and what are the tendencies now. So first of all, we can say that the book market of Ukraine is about 40 to 50 million books per year until year 2019. Then during COVID, the market fell a little bit before the full-scale invasion. There was an e-support announced by the government, which helped the publishing houses to survive within the first month of the full-scale invasion. I think that if it's not for the e-support, many publishing houses would not have opened their doors after the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Unfortunately, majority of the books that were sold under the e-support program were issued in Russia and imported from Russian Federation within the year 22. First half of the year, the book market did not operate at all. It started recuperating maybe in summer last year, and it has become stable in July last year. People have realized that no matter that the situation is complicated, the book is something that can support you, reinvigorate you, inspire you. It's an opportunity to go to another world, so to say, at least for some time. And on top of that, book may answer some of your questions. And there was a surge of demand for the books in Ukrainian history and in Ukrainian classics. People were looking for answers there. So rushing a little bit ahead, the picture in the book market today is different, and other genera are among the leaders of the sales. It's normal, it's escapism, so the leaders are fantasy and romance. Everything has changed. People are not looking for answers, but they're looking for opportunity to distract themselves from the sad reality. But that's the first period that demonstrated the following tendencies. The books in Russian language, they are banned I mean, the books imported from Russian Federation is banned from the point of view of the law that was approved by the parliament in June year 2023 and signed by the president in year 23. But for the time being, the committee has not approved all of the regulations and the law is not yet in force, but the readers themselves turn their faces away from the books from Russian Federation. But still there is a lot of pirate counterfeits in the Ukrainian market, but at least 85-87% of the books in the Ukrainian market are the books issued in Ukrainian language. And in Ukraine, I'm segregating it because there are Ukrainian issued books in Russian language and there are books in English language that are being printed in Ukraine and they're being sold normally. So Ukrainian market is kind of transforming, changing its configuration. Talking about the market shares, I would say that in year 2022 it was about 15 million copies, 50% fall from year 23, and the growth in 23 may be up to 20-21 million copies without training books. It's about 80-85 million euro in retail prices. I mean the book market of Ukraine. So the prices have significantly grown, but they've grown due to the growth of prices for paper in the global markets, and we can understand that among other factors of influence that were impacting the price before that, there will be yet another factor because the pulp that comes for the books printed, it also used for the powder, and the expansion of military equipment manufacturing capacities all around the world. It's happening all around the world, and the cellulose products are not enough to compensate for all of the markets. So physically there is no paper on the market, or there is a deficit. And on top of that, talking about what's going on in Yemen means that the ships that come from Asia to Europe, either with paper from Indonesia or China, they have to make their way around Africa, which delays the supply 3 to 4 months and adds more to the price, significantly adds more to the price, which means that I can forecast that this year we will get about 20-25% growth of price in the book market. The price of books, we will get more problems related to the fact that Ukrainian publishing houses cannot fulfill the orders of the publishers, and we have to understand that on top of the free market there are training books that are printed like with top priority at the government expense. And since publisher is a male type of profession, many men have left for the front lines, and technologically the publishing houses and the print houses are overloaded with orders, and the majority of books production was traditionally stationed in Kharkiv. Relocation of book enterprise is just so costly that it's easier to just abandon it and to build a new one from scratch. It's complicated, it's very difficult, so all of the print houses that were in Kharkiv, they were staying there. For example, Folio had a printing house in Kharkiv region where everything was occupied, and then as we liberated the area, there was no electricity supply, and we don't use our print house anymore. We print our books in other printing houses all around Ukraine, 11 of them in total. So half of these books are printed in Kharkiv and these ones are printed in Ternopil. Unfortunately, the situation with the sector is such that on the global market, the printing house operation is conditioned by the government policy in relation to the libraries, and I can say the situation with the libraries is terrible in Ukraine because none of the funds were replaced, and we're talking about almost 180 million copies, of which the majority are the Russian books in Russian language or Soviet books in Russian language. About 20% are the Russian and Belarusian books in Russian language, which make altogether about 65% of all of the books, and they definitely have to be replaced, but they cannot be replaced just randomly saying to the local communities just go and replace those books. We have to have a roadmap. We need a government policy, like how are we going to replace those books and at whose cost. Unfortunately, I make a lot of visits to the libraries of Ukraine with presentations. I just give the books to them. And last year I was on a tour in Dnipropetrovsk region, Volyn, Rivne region, Odessa region. I had 2 journeys around those areas, and I can say that frequently it happens so that you come to a library, and in the first book there is a huge locker with Lukyanenko, Marinina, Dontsova, and other authors published in the Russian Federation. Some of them, like Lukyanenko, are, for example, banned in Ukraine because Lukyanenko is taking an active anti-Ukrainian stance. And as you enter more or less of a library where the librarians understand that cannot do it that way, you see that 3/4 of the books in the shelves are turned to the wrong side, so that you cannot see what are the books. And the librarians say if we just write all those books off, we have to go home because we run out of the books this way. And now, as Ukraine is getting money from Europe for non-military purposes, I'm sure that if we know how to change things, if we have a roadmap, we will find out who and how will ask for help from our Western partners. Today, such program does not exist. Today, we know that the books have to be replaced, but we don't know who and how will do that. So I can forecast that the book market of Ukraine this year will grow about 10%, well, maybe 15% in the best case scenario, but it will be growing at the expense of the free market, at the expense of the buyers, and not because somebody is going to change the situation with the libraries. And we have to recognize eventually that per capita we have about 3-4 times more libraries than in the developed European countries. We should better have less libraries but with better books, and not act as we are a country full of libraries and books in those libraries, because it's not true. Those are just the storage of paper waste. Well, you've said that the market is growing thanks to the buyers, that people are ready to pay more for the books. In your opinion, why did it happen so? What pushed the people to reading more and being ready to pay more for a physical copy? And the fact that in Kyiv now there are more bookstores opening is just some kind of boom. Is it a response to demand, or the opening of the bookstores is the stimulation of demand? Well, first of all, about the reading. You know, there is a Japanese word tsundoku, which means buying books without reading them. It's also a very positive phenomenon. Many people change their home libraries. They just get rid of the books issued in Russia and replace them with Ukrainian books. This is a substantial lever for increase of manufacturing and growth of sales. Some people just have more time because TV marathon, in fact, disconnected a lot of people from commercial television. And we have an understanding that A year ago, when there were power shutdowns, the growth of sales of books was very significant because people were reading books when they did not have any electronic media, when they were not watching TV shows. And there are these two additional things, but the main thing, in my opinion, is that for the time being, reading, it's something in the tips of your fingers, something that you feel. There is no statistics, so I think that it has grown about 40%. I think that the Ukrainians want to feel themselves like cultural people, and I think this trend will continue, and we will get closer to European statistics because we're significantly behind. In terms of bookstores, we're like 14 times behind per capita. Talking about this area of the bookstores, we're behind the European partners. And it's not a problem of the fact that we have little number of bookstores. They are small by area and they contain less books, in fact. For example, Polish and Russian markets, they are about 200,000 names in active demand. In German, it's about 800,000 names. In Britain, it's 10 million titles. And in Ukraine, it's like 20,000 titles in active demand. So in terms of saturation of the book market, we are way behind. Our publishing houses have a lot of work to do. For example, there are 250 titles translated out of like 2,500 of the classical global books. We don't have government policy for the libraries. We don't have a sufficient number of translators. And now the publishers only publish the books that are either 100% bestsellers in order not to lose money, because they invest their own money, because there is no government policy as to the libraries, and we only can count on buyers, and we try to guess the demand. And talking about the bookstores, yes, a lot of bookstores are opening in Kyiv, and I think is kind of an advanced sense of the growth of market and the increase of range of book products in it. So far there is no such significant leap of demand, but we have to realize that many people from south and east have moved to Kyiv. We've lost a lot of places where the bookstores have shut down. We have a lot of places from where the people left. And meanwhile Kherson is Ukrainian, and meanwhile Kharkiv is Ukrainian, but the number of bookstores has decreased there significantly, and we can say that those bookstores, they replaced other bookstores. People moved to other places, and those bookstores have opened for them. In Lviv, Frankivsk, in Transcarpathia, the bookstores are opening everywhere for the people who moved there, having lost the access to their home libraries. So talking about the shape rather than content, do the publishers gravitate more to the cheap print, like cheap cover, soft cover, or do they gravitate to more quality printing? Well, I can say that the number of copies in average is about 1,000 per title, and with a number of copies like this, the soft cover doesn't make a lot of income, doesn't produce a lot of income. Well, yes, we issue something in soft cover, but the majority of the readers, they are ready to pay more to get more quality books for their home libraries rather than for one-time use. And as you've mentioned, Russian books have left the Ukrainian market, so that niche is taken either by Ukrainian authors or translations into Ukrainian. Do you have any information about the shares? How are they distributed? Ukrainian literature and foreign literature. Yeah, for foreign literature, is having a share of more than 80%. It's a bad situation for the internal market, but it's clear when the Ukrainian authors were oppressed for 30 years, or they were just pushed to Russia to be printed in Russian language. So I think that 7 or maybe 10 or 12 years have to pass. It's a slow process, and we will get the authors of the women's romance. We have a lot of Ukrainian detectives rather than only one Andrei Kokotyuha, and there is a lot of more niches where Ukrainian authors don't work at all. And the creation of market is a sophisticated task, because today, you know, that there is a riddle how to fill a bowl with rocks, then the sand, and then you add water, and the water fills all those niches. So this is approximately how the book market works. So I think that yes, it's about 10 years before we get the real market, and in case we get the government policy, it will be 4 to 5 books. Well, you've brought a number of new books that were published recently, so what's your advice? What can we read out of the most recent publications? Well, first of all, as for us as a publisher, we pay attention to 3 areas: Ukrainian and global classics, and in this area we've grown 3 to 4 times. We've increased the supply for the readers within the last 2 years. Folio issued about 600 new titles last year, and it's almost twice as much as year 21. Another thing we're actively involved in is the fact literature, the literature about what's going on in Ukraine today, about the battle operations, about the way the Ukrainian rear lives. Folio issued more than 200 titles like this within the last 10 years. One of these books that is present here is about Crimean Tatar families, a story of 14 families that were deported from Crimea to Middle Asia, who were coming back, and it's about the tortures and oppression and about the achievements during Ukrainian independence era. So this book is not only about Crimean Tatars and for Crimean Tatars, but is for all of the Ukrainians to understand how was the Soviet government treating, Soviet authorities were treating their own citizens, and how we need to help Crimean Tatars to reestablish their culture, to restore their culture that was destroyed. Also present here are 4 books of Pavlo Zagrabelny, an important author for me. I was a close friend with him within the last 10 years of his life. We've issued 17 books of his, and I think that he's the biggest Ukrainian classic of the Soviet era. Within the last 2 years, we've brought back Anatoly Dymarov for Ukrainian readers. His books were restored by us, the text that he was really writing, because during Soviet era the censure removed 30 to 40% of his text, and only now we issued the complete text. He was able to restore the text after the censorship, and 11 volumes of Dymarov. You know, I get so much appreciation from the readers for bringing this writer back. And I understand that the time has come to bring more authors back, such authors as Pavlo Zagrabelny, because after his death, within the 15 years, only 1 book of his was published in Ukraine, Roxolana. Due to the owners of the copyright, who is in Russia, it's his daughter. The son of the writer is not in Kyiv either. He has written an agreement with, he has signed an agreement with us, and I have to say that this book is issued without the consent of one of the owners of the copyright, his daughter. In fact, Mr. Pavlov was forgotten by both librarians and the publishers and the readers. And you know, Roxolana was published in Moscow in Russian language, and it was issued under the title In Sultan's Harem, and it's a Turkish TV show that is not related to this book at all. In the same way, Mr. Pavlov was infuriated when he was told that the TV show Roxolana, that many people have seen, it was created by Ostankina back then, and it was based on his novel. He said no, he refused to cooperate with Russian TV. The TV show was based on the book of Ostap Nazaruk and is in no way related to this monumental book, which was made by the author after his cooperation with Turkish scientists after spending a lot of time in Turkish archives. It's way more complicated and way more important than what we could see in the Russian TV show. So again, we've agreed with the son of the writer, and we are about to publish the biography of the writer. It was written by Mikhailo Zagrebelny about his father, and I was talking to Mr. Pavlov very frequently. So he was a kind of a clocked-in person. He did not disclose a lot of things even to his children, and when I was talking to his son, I was telling him, he was telling me this, that, and that, and his son is telling me, no, he never told us that. For example, in one of the books that Folio published, Yulia, there is a description of the fact when a protagonist is staying in a hospital in Tashkent in year 1941. Well, yeah, it was known, but nothing was known about what happened next, and he never told it to everybody before our conversation, but he just said, I never told this to anybody, but I'll tell you. So everybody who was stationed in Middle Asia, they were put on the planes and brought to the north of Iran to occupy it. On the 24th or 25th of August, the Soviet army occupied the north of Iran and the British army occupied the south, and they did it to arrange land-lease to Soviet Union when they realized things went awry, and thanks to this land-lease, only the Nazi troops were stopped near the Moscow. So now Folio is about to publish 8 volumes, the key works of Pavlo Zagrebelny, but then there will be 8 more volumes which will include such books that many literature scientists have to work on. That's a whole different story, and we try to bring it back, to bring Pavlo Zagrebelny back in full to the Ukrainian reader. Also, we can announce that there will be more books looking approximately like that: a collection of Tchaikovsky works, a collection of Bogdan Lepkiv, a collection of works of Kosach, those Ukrainians who were living either abroad or in Western Ukraine, and who are not so much, and with whom the Ukrainian reader is not so much familiar. Folio continues to issue 17 volumes of Oleksandr, whom I consider the biggest writer of Ukraine who was living abroad. And out of the new books that appear on the bookshelves now, there is this book today, a novel about Putin's doppelgangers. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? Well, you know, I worked a lot with the writers, asking them for some specific plots, and when I cooperated with Evgenia Kozharska about an investigator from Kyiv, in the beginning of the 20th century, I've issued a number of books with Danilo Yanevsky, Petrov Kraluk, Danilo Krasnozhan. We were talking to them about the Ukrainian history, but I never thought that I'm ready to write a fiction book without someone else's support and time. And it just happened so that I've written a small book during the first days of invasion. It was called Today, and now the foreign publishers bought the copyright. They're translating the book into their language. I think that maybe outside Ukraine there may be some screen adaptation. Then there was another book yesterday. It was a bit bigger. And for me, I realized that writing is kind of a treatment. Someone is treating their souls with reading, and I read like professionally. And you know, I've written this book within 52 days. It has 500 pages. That's a made-up plot, but it's kind of tipped off by the existing reality. You know, the topic of Putin's doppelgangers is a toy for the politologists. And I have a lot of calls from the journalists regarding my comments about doppelgangers. They think that I was researching this topic, but no, it's not my topic. I just made a fiction book, and the doppelgangers is just a tool. A tool I used to demonstrate the life in modern Russia. And this is what this book was written for. Here there is a non-standard way of information. There is only direct speech. There are two Russian females, 9 Russian males. Out of them, one Russian female thinks that she's ethnic Ukrainian. She's the biathlon athlete, and she takes part in the investigations of activities of Ukrainian special forces in Russia. She's a young girl. She travels around Russian Federation. And how it happens, you can read it in this book. Another girl, the protagonist, she lives in Moscow, and she works in Russian presidential administration. She's the secretary of a deputy heads of administration. Well, the one who, according to the plot, is in charge of Doppelganger's project, but the direct speech is on her behalf, not on his. And she tells a lot about the system of Russian authorities there. And to make sure that the readers understand it, I had to demonstrate the Russian authority from inside. Well, of course, it's a caricature of the existing authority. It's very simplified there. But again, there are 2 guards of Putin among the protagonists, 4 more doppelgangers, each of whom lives in either residence of the president of Russian Federation, and as he comes to the region, he is in charge of some activities, and a part of activities are covered by the doppelgangers. And there are people who oversee this process. They screen the doppelgangers, they train them, they pick them, they give them the plan of actions, how to meet the foreign leaders, how to give addresses and interviews during the press conferences. So there is a whole system of how this is happening built in this book. And one of the protagonists is a former Ukrainian who works for Yevgeny Prigozhin. And in this book I also described the history of Wagner. In fact, I was writing it in parallel with the events that were unfolding. I just put them on the pages, but it was happening day to day as I was putting the period in this book. You know, part of those events, they were described before they were unfolding, because I was kind of predicting them there. So as I was reading it, I was thinking that everything I have in my attitude to Russian Federation and Russian citizens, it has already happened in this book. So I've solved all of my problems, and I'm not going to read any more about it. And we've started writing a number of historic detectives with Metropavluk. So it was all happening during the reign of Volodymyr the Great. So we try to investigate something that we don't know from the historic books or historic documents, like how did the king die, or what was going on around the construction of Sophia Monastery. And yeah, I had pleasure of describing the detective and thinking how the book market was working back then. But again, I realized that this topic does not leave me alone. I've almost finished the new book. I started somewhere in October, and I'm about to finish it soon. It's called The Day After Tomorrow. I'm announcing this book for the first time here. So it's not a continuation of that topic, but it's about Russia too. It's way more broad picture. The things are going on in the years 37, 38, 52, 54, 89, 91 of the last century, and in the 2000s of this year. It's going on in Yakutsk, Elista, Kazan, Moscow, Rome, Paris, Zurich, Geneva. A lot of protagonists in this tapestry, so to say, but all of the protagonists, they are negative. So I can say there are no positive protagonists. They're all kind of antagonists, but the majority of them are the KGB generals and FSB generals of Russian Federation. And this picture of life in the Soviet Union and in Russia is demonstrated through those people, through their understanding of situation, through their thoughts. It's a completely different approach. There is no direct speech. It's the approach by the author, and the subtitle is a little bit different. It's called The Day After Tomorrow, a novel about big money, where I tell a lot of insights about big amounts of money that were disappearing. For example, the party money, for example, how Putin's money will be treated by FSB after he dies. So it happens with the 9th of May this year. Putin is buried in the mausoleum in the Red Square, and at the same time there is a Ukrainian UAV flying above and playing Red Viburnum. But in the second part of the book there is a whole different reality, and above the Red Square a Ukrainian missile is being shot down, which reaches Moscow, and it falls over the mausoleum, and everything there is in such a condition that Russian Federation files a complaint to United Nations that Ukraine destroyed the symbol of Russian sovereignty. But it's only the background of this tapestry, and the events that unfold there are related to the fact that in some regions there are things going on related to withdrawal of those regions from Russian Federation. It's about the collapse of Russian Federation, about the way it explodes from in the inside, but I'm not gonna tell you what's in the end. Well, description of Russia, antagonists, death of Putin, what's emotional in it for you? Well, as I write my text, I'm trying to write them with a cold head, so the texts are all mine, they are saturated with information, but they have poor content of descriptions. You know, I'm writing kind of from outside. This is how they are, and let them eat each other. But so talking about this book today, what will be the number of copies, where can we buy it, and in your opinion, who's gonna be your audience? Well, it's a complicated question, you know. The number of copies is 2500. This is the only thing I can say because it exists not only in Ukrainian, and I'm being asked, how come? How could you do this? In the website of Folio, it is in Russian language. And I can tell you that we don't clock in the territory of Ukraine. We exist in a world where behind the borders of Ukraine and Russia, many Russian-speaking people still live from the post-Soviet space, including Ukrainians who do not read in Ukrainian, and there is a significant number of Russians who read such type of literature, and everywhere where they can read this book, where they can read it in Russian, you know, this book is in Russian and in Ukrainian. It will appear in English shortly, and there are a lot of English speakers in outside Ukraine who want to read things like this, but we understand that it's not a native speaker who translated, and it will take time for the book to be issued abroad. So maybe somebody has any questions to our guests, please. Thank you. I would like to ask the author, so talking about these books of Pavlo Zakrebelny, can they be purchased now somewhere in the bookstores? Yes, they are out of print already. They are available from the website of Folio and in the majority of Ukrainian bookstores like Yakavuk, Kniharnya, Bukva. Yes, all the major market players, they have it available on their shelves. Another question? Yes, I have another question regarding this book about King Volodymyr. Is it going to tell the biography of the king himself, or is it going to be about his descendants too? Well, in this book, the King Volodymyr is just one of the protagonists, but it's not his biography. It's just a broad tapestry about the life in the territory of modern Ukraine back then, from Crimea all the way to the north of Ukraine. So the main protagonists come from Byzantium to Kyiv, and the King Volodymyr is just one of the protagonists in this book. In the following volumes, and the second book is in progress, it will tell you what was going on after the death of King Volodymyr, because the history is written by the winners, like Yaroslav the Wise. He did not become the king right after the King Volodymyr. Well, now that we don't have any more questions on the floor, I would like to thank you, Mr. Oleksandr. We were talking about the summary of the Ukrainian book market for year 2023, and you have not written the excerpt from this book. Yeah, this is how we will go. We will be wrapping up. Well, look, one of the doppelgangers who is protagonist of this book, he's the former homeless from Petersburg. Another is professor of physics from Ossetia. And another one that I will be reading you about is his direct speech. He lives in the Krasnoyarsk district in the residence of President of Russia called Sosny. So, Azulbai, Krasnoyarsk district. Well, I think I'm the most well-known Hakkas in the world, but none of those who've seen my meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan knows that I'm from Khakassia. I don't look Asian a lot. My face is a little bit wider, and still it's, even after the surgery, it's wider than Vladimir Putin's. Well, I was working as electrician within the last couple of years here, and I met a shaman who convinced me to become a doppelganger, a man of age who was bringing it even before the Yeltsin. I don't know how it works, but he exercised his ritual over me and I don't drink vodka anymore, and I started reading books. But sometimes I was reading more than one bottle of vodka. Well, I don't have higher education, but I've passed an exam in politology and literature. Well, generally, within the last year I was preparing. It's not about plastic surgery and training. First, they did something with a laser on my throat, and I started coughing as the real Putin. And then I started training with a speech therapist. They trained me to drive a car. I never had it. And I was asked whether I know my fairy tales. Of course, my grandfather was telling me, and shaman told me that I am a man of fire myself. I have to demand more from my friends, and I have to listen to shaman and Sergei Shoigu and his contribution to the global policy is only known to the people of his tribe, and our time will come. Just 1 month ago, I've written an obligation that I understand the responsibility in front of the people of Ukraine. They assigned me a rank of colonel. I got an account in Sberbank opened, and they promised me that I will be having a recreation in Helenjik every year. I haven't even asked him about the women. Well, it's inconvenient to ask shaman about those things now. So yes, there are rules, and there are more shamanic rituals with Putin, and everything like that is described there. So this doppelganger is a part of all those things. And another excerpt for you. April 15, 2022. The things are going on in Novoagarevo, and the speaker is the protagonist is the guard and the secretary of Putin. I think such person really exists. As you may remember, that was the day when the Moscow cruiser was destroyed. So, Ivan, I haven't seen it for one single time of my service with Vladimir Putin. I've got the 1 week vacation, and I can tell you about what was going on within the last 2 days. Yesterday, the Russians destroyed the Ukrainians destroyed Russian cruiser Moscow. The commanding officers were feeling so bad that the general staff of Russia has found about what happened from the Ukrainian telegram channels. And before all of them got to their offices, I already brought President back home. And after they were convinced that Ukrainian missile Neptune attacked our cruiser, covered with our best electronic countermeasures equipment, Mr. Volodymyr was sleeping already. I didn't come to my place. I was dreaming and with something in the dining room, and I was woken up by the number of officers. They came to our place at 3 in the night. No one could undertake the responsibility to wake Putin up. Only at 6 o'clock, when the last saved sailors were delivered to Sevastopol and the commander of the ship Kuprin was in my office, no one offered them to take a seat after this terrible news were communicated to the president, who was waking up very difficultly after the sleeping aid. So he was hysterical, half clad, sitting on his bed. He leaned back and started howling. So apart from Sergei Shoigu, there was me and Anton Vaina in the room. The only thing I could do is sit by the president's side and try to comfort them, but he broke out of and having grabbed a heavy chair, he threw it at the visitors. Sergei Shoigu jumped away, but the head of the administration has fallen on the floor together with the heavy chair. Mr. Volodymyr has grabbed his pole and yelled at Shoigu, "This is a symbol. Moscow is me. They drowned it." His voice was hysterical. Do they want the atomic bombardment? They will get it. London will burn first. Moscow is Kremlin. Kremlin is me. And I'm not coming to Kremlin anymore. And every single faggot which admitted it will be executed. And don't ever you dare to recognize the death of the people publicly. And looking at me, he exhaled and continued calmly. Vanya, help me to get clad. Why do you stay standing here? Get out of my office and wait somewhere else. And the last third excerpt? So it's March 28, 2023. A protagonist is that former Ukrainian, the aide of Yevgeny Prigozhin. So it's going on in Molkino in Krasnodarsky district, where Wagner base was located. So March 28, 23, Molkino, the meeting of the commanders was gathered at the 8 in the morning. They were very important for Mr. Yevgen. He drew my attention to this in the evening. This is why I reached all of them personally without trusting the aides of theirs. So I got distracted. You know, when the management trusts you, the dragon teeth are not yet done, but by the 1st of the next month they should be dug into the soil. The tents are ready to accept the extended contingent. Everything is deployed. The boss said during the meeting, Shoigu and Gerasimov wanted to take a part of our boys, but this year the president agreed to extend more contracts to the new guys, to the new recruits. So before people want to switch, we have to allow them. We got the first list of such warriors who, behind the backs of their commanders, submitted such applications, and they are here at Molkino base. And just now I've realized whom we're talking about. That was a transport from Rostov that arrived yesterday, and the boss asked them not to allow the boys to communicate with the others. Then there was a discussion, and the majority of commanders were unanimous. Cannon fodder. So nobody signed any protocol, and after the meeting the boss asked me whether I understand everything. I said yes, I have 6 of my best boys from Z team. Alright, Prigozhin says organize them for the evening. I'll make a video myself, but let them take the sledgehammers and finish first 3 or 2 of them in the way that we are used to here, and make sure your boys know what those bitches are convicted for. You know, we're at work here. Let's not forget it. You probably don't remember how I pulled you from the swamp, so don't forget it. And then it happened in the way the council decided. There is a polygon, a range in the area, and we've equipped it with according to the NATO standards. So you know, I've seen a lot of things during the 90s and in the front lines, but what I have done, I would never have done it by my own will, because otherwise my brains would explode as the brains of that one whose head was destroyed with a sledgehammer. Yevgen Prigozhin was sitting in a tribune, and some of them was waiting for the conviction. Yevgen Prigozhin was applauding. They brought a man there dressed in civil. His face was blue. His teeth were broken out. He was howling. I didn't see him as they were deployed. He was brought in the trunk of an offload. I've taken a sledgehammer, 12 kilograms of weight. I was training myself before. I was putting the pieces of frozen beef and breaking them. So it's good that I've clad myself in a medical clothing. The rest of the convicts were watching all of this, almost 40 of them. the old convicts that hardly were hoping to survive. The commanders did not applaud this time, and Yevgen Prigozhin has shaken my hand and he asked me, "Do you know what is decimation? You know, the others, they have just won a lottery," and then continued to the execution. Thank you. Joining us was Oleksandr Krasovytskyy, the head of Folio Publishers, and Ukraine Media Center will be back in operation on Wednesday. Stay tuned. Thank you for staying with us.